Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the launch event of the EulerSwap Builder Competition. I am going to give you a very quick introduction to the Builder Competition, and then we're going to jump right into the exciting part, and that is the introduction to EulerSwap with Michael Bentley. So let's jump right in because I'm super excited to get started. For those of you who do not know us, we are Encode Club. We are a developer education community, and we help developers learn, build, and forge their careers in emerging tech. So we do this through a range of programs, including hackathons, which is similar to the Builder competition that we're here to launch today. But many of you will also know us from our Educate series, which are public education series for everyone to dip their toes into some new tech. We also run boot camps, so if you're looking to learn a new programming language or dive into some tech that you haven't before, boot camps are a great place to get started with an intensive course. And accelerators often follow on from hackathons, helping you take your hackathon projects or early stage projects and starting to make them startup ready, which is really fun. So that's what we do at Encode Club. I am Rebecca. A lot of you will know me. I recognize some names in chat, and it's great to see you all again. But for those who do not know me, I am a program manager in Encode Club, which means that I'm here to support you on your builder journey. So if you have any questions, any concerns, you can message me, you can email me, and I am here to help answer any of your questions or connect you with the people who can. So what we're here to do today is to launch the EulerSwap Builder Competition, which is, of course, so kindly being hosted by Euler. The aim of this competition is to celebrate the release of EulerSwap by inviting you to build something really, really cool on the new protocol. Some ideas are going to be coming up today in the session with Michael. We're going to try and find out what he might want to see built on EulerSwap. And then on Thursday, we have another workshop with Doug, who is going to talk us through some integration ideas as well. So if you already have an idea, that's great. If you don't already have an idea, there's still lots and lots of time to get one. So the big news is the prize pool in the EulerSwap Builder competition is huge. There is a lot to be won here. We're going to have 5 overall winners. That's 1 in first place, 1 in second place, and 3 third place winners with a prize pool of $50,000. So massive opportunities here, and I'm hoping to see some really, really impressive projects built out that are worthy of these amazing prizes. Moving swiftly on, the only other things I want to tell you about are the schedule. So today, of course, starting very soon, we're going to invite Michael up and we're going to have an introduction to Euler and EulerSwap. On Thursday, we're going to have our workshop exploring integration ideas with Doug. Our submission deadline is 4 weeks from now, and that is on the 6th of July. So make sure you mark your calendars for that one, although I will be emailing you before the deadline so you will not miss it. And then we're going to have a demo day in mid-July where we're going to see the best projects that are built out during the competition. So that's the kind of TLDR of what I think you need to know about the competition. For now, if you have any questions, put them in chat and I can go through them at the end of the session. But what you should do now is you should join the Encode Discord and the Euler Discord. The Encode Discord is a great place to be for the Builder competition. There'll be announcements, reminders, and you can get access to our mentors for ideation, for technical support, for anything you might need them for. And let me put that link on. You should see that link now in the corner. So that's the place to join if you're not already for the Builder competition. You should also join the Euler Discord, where you can keep up to date with announcements and know everything that's going on with Euler as well. So I will also send you that link. So make sure you've joined both those Discords. They might require some verification. So if you join them now and then go through the verification steps after the event, just so I don't lose your focus, but they're 2 great places to join now. You should also check out the white paper that was just released for EulerSwap if you are interested. So I will also send you a notification for that, for you to also open in your tabs, but not read yet because we don't want to lose your attention. But keep that open. It's also available and linked on the Builder Competition website. So if you lose the link, don't worry, it's easy to find. And the next thing you should do is, of course, attend the workshops, which you are already here for workshop number 1, and it's amazing to see so many of you. We have another one on Thursday, and then it's time to start building. So that's what we want from you, and we're really excited to have Michael joining us. So we're going to start by kind of having a bit of a Q&A session with Michael, and kind of answering some questions about the background of Euler, a bit about his journey, and then we're going to dive into EulerSwap and what he wants to see being built. So let me close my slides so we're nice and big. Hi, Michael. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Amazing. And everyone in chat, please welcome Michael to the stage. So Michael, what we're here to do today basically is to give everyone some context for those who are new to Euler, although I can see from the GM oils in chat that we have some Euler fans anyway. But for those who are new to Euler, we want to give them some context about what you do and your background, and then we're going to jump into talking about EulerSwap. So first of all, we'd like to kind of get to know you a little bit. So can you talk about, well, first introduce yourself, of course, and talk a bit about your journey into crypto and how you ended up here today.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm Michael. I'm co-founder and CEO of Euler Labs. Yeah, Euler, for those of you that don't know, is a lending and borrowing platform. Similar to Morpho or Aave, for those of you familiar with some of our competitors. And yeah, how did I get involved? How did I get started? Well, actually, professionally, I got started through Encode, because Euler was actually an Encode hackathon prize winner back in 2020 during the height of DeFi summer. And so it all began professionally in August, September of 2020, I think. But yeah, my background before that, I used to be an academic. I used to be a research scientist at Oxford University, where I used to do sort of mathsy things in conjunction with biologists. So I used to do evolutionary game theory. Was my passion, my studies. And how did I get started? Well, I sort of initially, I think I was, I started as a bit of a skeptic. A friend of mine was sort of talking about crypto 2015 or even earlier, and I thought it sounded like not great, to be honest. So started as a skeptic, but by 2017 I got sort of pulled in and nerd sniped into the industry, and was obviously trying to like trade Bitcoin and try and make a bit of money. And yeah, I think I started then eventually trying to write bots and things to try and trade on some of the really early decentralized exchanges back then, like IDEX and EtherDelta. And yeah, I kind of just stuck around. I mean, through that time, there was a massive bull run then that then collapsed. And I think 2018, 2019 was pretty dark times for crypto. But slowly in 2019, there was sort of shoots of recovery, and that's when like Uniswap and Compound really emerged as like two big powerhouses in DeFi. And that's when I really started to hack in earnest and think, you know, I want to do something kind of cool here. And so, yeah, through Encode, I started participating in more and more hackathons and like building little things. And eventually that led to the hackathon that my co-founder and I won, which was the Spark 2020 hackathon. And yeah, that's where the foundations for Euler were laid during that year.
So would you say that your maths background has helped you on your kind of founder journey, or do you think it was a sort of sharp left turn when you went from kind of your academics and maths to what you're doing now?
Yeah, I definitely think it's helped. I mean, it's not like but by and large, I don't think the maths in DeFi is like crazy difficult. You know, if you've had a bit of training, it's in maths, it's not the hardest maths in the world, but it's I think it's a really useful skill to have in DeFi, because it is essentially kind of you know, I used to do what was kind of called game theory, I suppose, and like thinking about how systems change over time, especially when you've got different entities in the system essentially playing different strategies. And so you model it out as a game and think like, who's going to win the game? What's the best strategy? And sometimes there isn't a best strategy, right? There are just trade-offs, and sometimes there's very clearly one strategy that over time will win and take over the game or win the game. And I think being able to think in that way and sort of like break it down and look at like how incentive structures play out, and so like if you incentivize a system, like it'll favor these sorts of strategies and things. I think it's a really useful way to be able to think about the world. And I think just being an academic and having that kind of background, I was more of a jack of all trades. I'd say, like, I'm not a mathematician by training. I'm also not a computer scientist, and I'm also not a biologist. But I used to work in a department where I do all three of those things kind of badly, but good enough that I was, useful. Within a collaborative environment, I was still useful. And I think that's kind of the true of DeFi. You have to be able to do a little bit of coding, but also know a little bit of finance and maybe a little bit of maths along the way. Doesn't hurt. You have to be good at a few different things.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And I think a lot of the kind of audience today, I know from some of the names I'm seeing, I know that a lot of people, well, not a lot, some of you guys have mathsy backgrounds. Alicia, obviously from Euler, says that her PhD in mathematics was mathsy things. So I know that the Encode community, we have such a breadth of backgrounds, and jack of all trades is kind of a great way of putting it, because especially coming into a hackathon, you don't come in and do just one thing. You do lots of bits of different things within your kind of the project that you're working on, with sort of taking from everyone's in your team strong suits, but everyone has to do a bit of everything. So being a jack of all trades is great for that.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a bit about, I guess, firstly, like the first iteration of Euler, what you built out in the hackathon that you met your co-founder, or that you started with your co-founder in?
Yeah.
And why you were interested in it?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I suppose I was just interested in DeFi and that emerging system. And so I wouldn't say, truthfully, it wouldn't have, like, we ended up building a lending protocol, but it could have been anything at that time. I was interested in all sorts of little things. So I guess, like, probably most people who do hackathons, very easily nerd snipe. So one of the early things I wanted to build was more like a trading game. I guess it would be more like an NFT type trading game, and kind of took that into one of the hackathons, never finished it, and so put that to one side. And then I think it might have even been the competition host, so like Anthony from Encode Club, I think might have said, have you thought about this, doing something more finance or DeFi related? So we started looking at options there, and then I thought it turns out there was this thing in lending at the time where compound just emerged, and people were basically borrowing against their crypto assets. And a big question was, how do you set the interest rate? How much should it cost to borrow some dollars against your Bitcoin, right? And in traditional finance, that's usually determined by somebody in a bank, some analyst somewhere goes, yeah, I think this is the right rate, or there's kind of a market dynamic going on, but the market dynamics like infused with a centralized decision-making entity, usually a central bank somewhere sets the like base rate, and then you've got other banks that sit on top of that. So in DeFi, without all those central banks and like centralized entities, like how do you actually set interest rate? And that's something that I realized that there was a little branch of maths that I knew a little bit about, called control theory, that helps you set this. And essentially you can kind of set an interest rate a little bit like the way that you set the thermometer in your home to keep the temperature in the home constant. You want to set an interest rate in a similar way, where you try and target some like natural behavior in the system. And it turns out that the best way to do that is probably to try to make sure that the number of lenders and borrowers in the system is kind of balanced. And so, yeah, you can use this branch of maths called control theory to kind of balance the lenders and borrowers. And when you do that, an interest rate just kind of pops out of the system organically, and it's not really set by any particular party. It's just the system as a whole sets its own interest rate. So that's what I started working on. And but with my co-founder Doug, we started exploring other optimizations, other things that we thought would be cool. And one of the big things back then was like, can you borrow against any asset? Can you turn any asset that you hold in your crypto wallet into collateral that you can then borrow against? And so we were trying to address, people call it long tail lending. Yeah, as it turned out, I don't think that was probably the biggest, it was probably not the biggest use case, honestly, for Euler in the end. It turns out that Euler V1 was very, very popular amongst people doing different types of trades, but that's the nature of startups, right? You kind of come in with some ideas and you adapt the product over time. And Euler V2, which we launched back in September last year, iterated on those really early ideas again and actually abstracted things even more so that we could allow people to build all sorts of different types of products. Because I think one of the biggest lessons we found actually was that we just didn't, it's hard to predict ahead of time what the market wants, right? And so whatever you build, you'll always get people coming to you asking, oh, but can it do this? And if, you know, often the answer is no. So with V2, we wanted to make something far more flexible than V1. But yeah, that's how we got started.
So after the Spark hackathon that you obviously went on to win, what made you sort of stick out with Euler? What was the kind of the spark that made you go, we should keep building this out? Like, we're not just going to keep it as a hackathon project, we want to keep going. Because obviously you say that V2 was, you kind of iterated on V1, but what made you continue building out V1 in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, well, we were very fortunate. We raised, you know, when you win a hackathon, you will probably get interest from, you know, private investors. I'd say that's one of the great things about hackathons is they are an opportunity to showcase your skills and your ideas to early stage, you know, venture investors. And so that's what happened really. It wasn't necessarily something I planned going into the hackathon. I just want to, you know, truthfully, actually, I think looking back, I think my wife and I were about to have our first child, and I was thinking I could maybe if I won the hackathon, might be able to buy us a pram or, you know, like buy some baby stuff. So I think that was the original motivation. Then it became clear as we were doing the hackathon that actually we had something kind of special, and that maybe we could go on and win it, and that would lead to something. So yeah, early stage venture investors approached us shortly after winning and made us an offer to essentially to quit our day jobs and make a go of it full time. And so that was the main early motivation. Yeah, was we got financing to really go on and turn the hackathon project to a real fully fledged product that we could bring to market.
That's amazing, an amazing opportunity that you got, and a great motivation going into that hackathon to come out and buy a pram. So to think that it started from so little and now it is where it is. So before we kind of move on to the focus on EulerSwap, there are probably in the crowd today quite a lot of people who are aspiring founders. Who maybe they founded something, maybe they're kind of building it out in the background, or it hasn't quite taken off yet, or maybe they've had some failed ventures. What have you kind of, and this is like a very, very broad question, so feel free to think about it for a second or kind of take it on your own path. But what have you kind of learned as a founder over the years that you think, that you kind of either that you wish someone had told you before, or that it's been such a good learning experience, but it's something you have to go through yourself? It's not just something that someone can tell you.
Yeah. I think it's like determination is the most important characteristic. You really have to be very determined and keep pushing. It's so easy to, I think a lot of people are in hackathons, and myself included, are very guilty of this. We sort of like keep dancing around, jumping around ideas, but sometimes what you have is already enough to actually get to the next step, and you just need to like be really doggedly determined to get there. And yeah, be confident in your own ideas. I think I can't remember what the exact phrasing is from the guy, the guy who created A16Z. Essentially, they look for people who are really like confident in their ideas and can like have a vision how to make things, how to take their what they built and make it absolutely massive. So they have that confidence, but then they are prepared to adapt and actually see the world as it is and see the evidence in front of their own eyes. So it's and be able to switch courses as needed. So yeah, it's not just about, it's this delicate balance between, you know, constantly switching course and just jumping to the next, you know, hot trend. You know, it's very tempting to do that. That's probably not going to get you somewhere. But if you also just doggedly stick to the same thing and never really adapt, even though people keep giving you advice or the little like signs in the market that, you know, you don't really have product market fit. So it's this really fine balance between the two, I guess. And yeah, it's hard to find, but it just comes from a little bit of experience, I think. So yeah, the best way to get experience is just to have that determination to keep trying and not give up. Yeah, probably the most important skill, I would say.
Yeah, and definitely one that needs to be learned through practice, not something that you can, as much as an outside force can tell you to be determined. If you can't do it yourself, you're not gonna push through the kind of the tough times where you're not sure if you should continue building, or if you've kind of reached the end of what you've been building out and it's actually not going to work because you don't have product market fit or something like that.
Yeah, you got to be really curious and keep question absolutely everything. Like question your own assumptions all the time, and yeah, and don't be afraid to change if through that process you find something, but don't just jump because there's some shiny new thing over there that you know that people are talking about a little bit more today on Twitter than they were yesterday.
Yes, very true, very true. But talking about shiny new things,
yeah.
Can we move on to talk a bit about EulerSwap? Can you give us I guess first the like spiel about what EulerSwap is, but like give us kind of an in-depth introduction, because that's what everyone is here to do today, to hear so that they can get started building.
Yeah, so EulerSwap is it's a new type of decentralized exchange. You know, fundamentally allows swappers to swap assets from A to B. And it works differently to other decentralized exchanges because it's built on top of a lending protocol. And that fundamentally changes the dynamics of things in some very interesting ways. I guess let me just set the stage for why it's important that you do that. Today on normal decentralized exchanges, when people swap, they make use of liquidity. And where does that liquidity come from? It's provided by liquidity providers or market makers who essentially put assets into the pool, usually on both sides. They'll put in USDC on one side and ETH on the other side, let's say, and then they're making markets for swappers. Doing that on a decentralized exchange is incredibly inefficient. It makes incredibly inefficient use of the capital at stake. For every single block in which there's no trade on your liquidity, or even when there is a trade, but it's just so small that it only uses like 2% of the liquidity or something. Essentially, most of the liquidity is just sat there wastefully being used, right? It's being very inefficiently used. If it were instead being used more productively, for instance, being lent out to earn an interest rate, then you would earn more money on the assets that you've deposited into the DEX. Of course, most DEXs don't work like that. So you just have this very inefficient use of capital inside the DEX, where the amount that you make on swaps, you know, the swap fees that you accrue, the hurdle rate that they have to reach to reach profitability is huge, because they should be, you know, it's much easier to just supply liquidity to a lending platform or just lend it out. So if you're going to be LPing, which is a much harder thing to do, you've got to get over this huge hurdle of making more in swap fees than you could just basically get from lending. And then you've got to overcome some of the other like notorious costs in terms of providing liquidity, like impermanent loss that people might have heard about. So yeah, LPing or market making in a DEX is generally quite costly and inefficient use of capital. The other thing is, when you have an asset, when you put liquidity into the DEX, it's effectively an asset. You'll often get a token back that denotes your position in that DEX. And people have asked for 5 years now, since I first got into the industry, have said, oh, can I use my LP tokens from a DEX as collateral on a lending platform? I want to be able to lend again. I want to be able to use it as collateral so that I can borrow something else. Now, why do they want to do that? There's usually two reasons. One reason is because they want to hedge. So they are providing liquidity in two assets. One is USDC and one is some other asset. maybe they're a bit nervous about the other asset. So they want to essentially borrow against the LP token so that they can hedge out the exposure by going short on something that they're effectively long on by holding the LP. So there's this hedging use case. The other one is that they just want to amplify their exposure through the LP and make deeper liquidity for the markets. Two reasons for that is, one, they're either the project themselves and they want to create deeper liquidity for their own assets, or two, they're doing the job on behalf of somebody and they're getting paid for it and they want to amplify the amount that they're getting paid. So to do that, you would typically deposit your LP token as collateral, go and borrow some assets, convert them back into the LP assets and redeposit them, and then borrow against it, and you sort of loop around. And through this looping trade, you can effectively multiply the exposure that you've got and create deeper liquidity. But yeah, it takes a long time to do that, and you have to make use of both a DEX and a lending market, and it's complicated and horrible and all the rest of it. And so the problem that EulerSwap solves is by building on top of a lending protocol. When you supply liquidity into EulerSwap, you'll earn yield from lending and borrowing on the assets that you deposit by default, which makes more efficient use of capital. And B, you'll be able to collateralize your position so that you can either increase the depth of liquidity or borrow against it. And fundamentally, that's what EulerSwap is.
So from a builder perspective, what should people be excited about, like the introduction of EulerSwap? Why should builders be excited?
Yeah, lots of reasons. I mean, EulerSwap introduces all sorts of new functionality for people LPing. Uniquely, LPs in EulerSwap are essentially individuals. The LP position is created on top of your own account on that you have an Euler. So let's just take you through the basic steps of setting up a position. Normally, you would deposit assets into a DEX, and then you would be immediately providing liquidity. But you would be pooling your assets typically with other people providing liquidity in the DEX, and you'd have this sort of pooled position. On EulerSwap, you deposit assets into a lending protocol first, and then you effectively install the AMM. You're kind of installing an exchange rate mechanism on top of your on top of your account that allows other people to rebalance your lending and borrowing positions on your account for you. And this opens up all sorts of weird and wonderful new mechanisms for people to use. One of them is called just-in-time liquidity provision, where effectively, let's say I hold just USDC, and Rebecca, you want to get some USDT. You can send me some USDC as a swap input amount. That then goes on top of my account. It's then going to get collateralized alongside my existing USDC. My account will then borrow the USDT that you're wanting, and it'll send it to you just in time liquidity to satisfy the swap. So it's a very cool new feature that doesn't exist on any of the DEX today. And there are lots of ways to build on this, I think, in terms of creating a nice interface for people to use to be able to A, set up these positions, or B, be able to visualize what's happening inside the position, to be able to understand how is collateral and debt inside the lending protocol being used to provide liquidity for swaps. There's also some cool things you could do in terms of rebalancing the position. In the hedging use case I mentioned earlier, you'll often want to essentially clear out any debt in your account periodically, or try to change the amount of liquidity that you're providing inside the DEX from time to time. And so being able to rebalance and having like clear tools to be able to rebalance, I think would be awesome. And then if people are into smart contract development and want to get involved on that side of things, I think there's lots of cool options as well. One would be able to essentially make a pooled model on top of EulerSwap. There are, as I said, typically today, the liquidity provision is just a single account, and so you're in control of your own AMM. But you could make that an account of smart contract, and then rebuild a pool-based model in which all sorts of LPs could then supply to this smart contract, which would then be running an account on Euler, which would be lending and borrowing and swapping. Yeah, and then if people really want to get advanced, I think there are adaptations to EulerSwap you could make where you do really cool things with, fixed rate lending and borrowing, and the interface between swapping and fixed rate lending and borrowing with PT tokens and stuff. There's like Pendle type things you could potentially create in Euler, but that's definitely a very advanced use case that might be ambitious for however long we've got, a few weeks.
Yeah, we've got 4 weeks. So from your perspective, if you somehow found the time in the next 4 weeks, what would you what would you build, or what would you like to build in sort of given the reasonable amount of time that we have, what would you yourself like to build on top of EulerSwap that you just don't have time for?
So I love front-end development. It's a bit of a weird, it's something that I was self-taught front-end sort of development years and years ago, just because I enjoyed it. I wanted to be able to build websites and things, so I self-taught, and I really enjoy it. I think it's great, and especially when you add in the visualization stuff, trying to like visualize, with graphics and things. So if we just cleared my calendar now, I would probably start by first trying to give visuals of what does an EulerSwap LP position look like? How is the liquidity distributed? What does that look like? I'd then probably try to add on, extra features in terms of simulating what happens to swaps on my account. How does that increase or decrease my debt or collateral? How much swap output do I get? Building basic swap forms and things. I'd probably approach it that way, first and foremost.
Well, luckily for everyone here, Michael is not allowed to compete in the EulerSwap builder competition, but you can also have some fun building out what he would like to spend his time doing if he could. We've actually got some questions in chat related to, so the first question is related to the white paper. I'm not sure if you can see the chat, but Sky has asked, they said, I saw the statement that EulerSwap enables on-chain and off-chain rebalancing. How do you do it for off-chain rebalancing? Can you talk a bit about on-chain and off-chain rebalancing?
Yeah, sure. So as I said, when you have an EulerSwap account, you're effectively installing your own custom AMM curve on top of your Euler account. And what that allows, in the simplest case, what that allows what happens with the AMM is that essentially it changes the amount of deposits you've got in Euler. It will take, add in some extra USDC and take out some ETH and vice versa. So it will change your deposit balances inside Euler. It can also add and remove debt on your account as well if you have a more advanced type AMM installed. And rebalancing is often used to make sure that you're providing liquidity where people want it. So there's two things that people refer to when they talk about rebalancing. One is rebalancing the liquidity to make sure that your liquidity is most concentrated around the price that people are trading at now. Liquidity typically has a kind of like peak distribution, but if the price is over here and all your liquidity is over here, you're not going to get many trades. You'll have this modest amount of liquidity in the tail here. So you'll probably want to move the peak of your liquidity to match the current price somehow. So there's periodic rebalancing of liquidity. That's one type of rebalancing. The other type of rebalancing is rebalancing a hedge. So the way that people hedge on AMMs is essentially they deposit USDC to begin with, and then rather than buying ETH and LPing with ETH, they'll essentially deposit USDC, borrow some ETH, and then they'll create an AMM with the borrowed ETH that they've just taken out as a loan. And what that means is initially, at that moment in time, they're completely hedged because they on the one hand they've got this ETH debt, and then the other hand they've got this ETH deposit inside the LP. And as people swap in and out of the LP, the amount of ETH that they've got in the LP will change. As people buy ETH, they take ETH out of the pool, and that means you'll have less. And if people sell ETH, they'll put more ETH into the pool, you have more. And what you want to do to remain neutral is to essentially maintain the hedge, and so you sort of rebalance the amount of debt you've got with the LP, the amount of ETH you've got in the LP. So that's just a really quick primer on rebalancing. There's rebalancing liquidity and rebalancing the hedge. And now the question is, how do you do that in EulerSwap? In EulerSwap, it's as simple as well. Yeah, let me say the functionality that enables you to have an EulerSwap account on Euler is this tool called an operator. What the operator does is you install the operator on your account, and the operator is essentially the EulerSwap smart contract, which is then allowed to change the balances on your lending pools. Now, normally that's not possible, right? If Rebecca had deposits and debt inside Euler, I wouldn't be able to just come in and arbitrarily change Rebecca's deposits and debt, that she might be mad if I did that. But so EulerSwap's kind of like a special case where we voluntarily allow somebody, or in this case a smart contract, to be able to change the balances of deposits and debts in my account, because I want to try and get swap fees or make liquidity for markets, right? And so to rebalance, what you do is you essentially uninstall the operator, change the parameters of the operator, maybe even make some manual operations on your account, repay some debt if you want to change the hedge, or deposit some more assets if you want to increase your collateral or whatever. And then you just reinstall another operator with new parameters. And that's what rebalancing amounts to. It's effectively uninstalling and reinstalling the operator on your account. And the reason I say you can do this on-chain or off-chain, if you do this off-chain, this would just be a script that you run that obviously would need access to your account. So it would need to have a secure private key somewhere, which allows it to essentially modify and carry out transactions on the account, to uninstall and reinstall. But you could also potentially do this with a smart contract. If you made a general smart contract that could rebalance your deposits and debts, then it could also uninstall and reinstall the operator. And then you would ultimately need some way of communicating with that smart contract. And so you could maybe incentivize people to rebalance for you, or again, you could try and hook it up to some off-chain scripting system.
Thank you. That's hopefully very helpful for Sky and anyone else who was interested in rebalancing. We've actually now got more questions coming in as well. So we're going to have to, I guess, kind of not speed run them, but we'll just go from question to question, which might seem a bit jagged, but we want to answer everyone's questions, so it's how I'll have to do it. So Michael has asked, if each AMM instance is a separate pool, can you explain a bit about how routers or optimizers would find the best price or combination of prices, and how computationally intensive is it?
Yeah, it's good. It's a really great question. I guess a few points about this. Just to set the context, is normally when you LP, people, as I said, they aggregate their liquidity into a single pool. And so if somebody's trying to find a best price, they'll just scan that pool, and everybody's liquidity is kind of mashed together. So if the swap happens on the pool, then a swap kind of happened on everybody's account simultaneously, because they all lose a little bit of one asset and gain a little bit of somebody else's. EulerSwap works differently than that. Every single individual has their own pool now, in some sense. And so if a swap comes in, it has to find one or several of those pools in which it wants to deposit assets and take out others. And so that problem is called, solving the best price, is essentially a routing problem. It's like, how do I find the best pool to swap into? And maybe it's not one pool. Maybe it amounts to breaking the trade up into smaller pieces and swapping a little bit on multiple pools. It's definitely harder on EulerSwap to do that. I would say there's absolutely no question about that, because there's now more pools than there were before. However, a few points. Firstly, in practice, if we look at LPs on chain today, the way it's changed over time is that more and more we just see that there's a small number of private market makers, or smaller number of large LPs providing most of the liquidity. For example, the Euler DAO has liquidity pools for the Euler token, but it's running the pools. Most of the liquidity for Euler token and USDC is from the DAO, and so the days in the past where we used to have thousands of retail users supplying LP positions, I think are largely gone. There are some exceptions, of course, but largely that's not the case anymore. So we think EulerSwap is probably better suited to professional LPs that are either DAOs or larger market makers and things that will, and so there might be a long tail of LPs, but the top 3 to 5 will probably be the ones that really matter. The second point to make about this is just that routing isn't our kind of problem. It's a problem that we outsource to a community of what are called solvers out there. And those solvers are, very technically capable people who are heavily incentivized to find the best quotes, because they make lots of money off solving and routing. If they can find the best prices, they outcompete one another. And so, yeah, they're incentivized to solve this very difficult problem. It's not really our problem, I wouldn't say. And they're already solving it to some degree very, very well. If you think, when Uniswap v2 first emerged, there was just one AMM, and then suddenly everybody was forking Uniswap v2. And so then there were hundreds of instances of Uniswap v2 on chain, and the solvers had to figure out how to route through all these horrible forks of Uni v2 and so on. So yeah, it's a challenge, no doubt, but it's not our challenge, fortunately. If you want to do anything on that front, be my guest. But I think it'll be very interesting problem.
So Baiwu has asked, what is the benefit of having aggregation over Euler pools versus Uniswap, which already can find and split amount multiple pools?
I guess this is a question similar to the last one. Benefit of aggregation over Euler pools versus Uniswap. Yeah, I think it's more about the LPs, right? Like LPs will go where it's either cheapest for them to go or that they will make the most money. And Euler is cheaper and makes them more money. It makes them more money because they earn lending yield on top of, instead of earning no yield when there are no swaps. And it's cheaper because they can make more productive use of their capital by borrowing against it in order to hedge or to supply more liquidity or to take advantage of yielding opportunities out there in the market. And so ultimately, LPs should prefer to use Euler swap because it's both makes them more money and costs them less money. And in that sense, then the aggregators don't really care whether which pools they're interacting with, right? They just want to find the best quotes. And so if the best quotes end up on EulerSwap, they will come to EulerSwap. And they're the main advantages. Yeah.
Iyasu has said that they saw a tweet that EulerSwap did a 5 times bigger swap than the pool's liquidity. They said, is the limit 50 times the pool's liquidity? And if not, what is the limit?
Yeah, great question. This incredible thing that we've not seen before in DeFi. So it's the DeFi first moment, very exciting for us. It makes use of this feature called just-in-time liquidity. And I'll go through the mechanics of this. I just run out of drinks, so I'm getting a little bit hoarse here, but I'll explain how it works, and then hopefully this will make clear what the limits are to this. So with just-in-time liquidity, supposing I was to hold $1 million of USDC in a pool, and now Rebecca, you want to do a big trade on USDC to USDT. You would essentially say you've got 10 million, you want to swap, absolutely monstrous trade. I know you've got all this cash in the bank, so you're desperate to get Tether from USDC. So you would send in the 10 million USDC, that would hit my account. It would then provide my account with extra collateral. I would then borrow USDT and then I'd send that back out to you. So let's say I charge 0 fee in this case. After the swap, you've got 10 million USDT. What's my account look like? Well, I've now got 11 million USDC and I've got 10 million USDT debt. Why is that possible? Why can I have that? I've now got 11 times more collateral than I started with, and I've got this kind of 10x debt situation. That's because there's a collateral factor on USDC, which means that USDC in Euler can be used as collateral to borrow USDT. In our case, the main pool on Euler has a collateral factor of 0.95. And that 0.95 essentially allows 20x leverage on the account, which means in principle, I could have 20 million USDC and 19 million USDT debt. That's the maximum I can. If I had $1 more than that, my account would be unhealthy and I would be forced liquidated from in the account. So what just-in-time liquidity does is it essentially allows the AMM to use that extreme liquidity. So in the one extreme, I can have 20 million USDC deposits and 19 million USDT debt. Alternatively, I could use my original 1 million USDC, swap it to Tether, and I could do the opposite. I could go have 20 million USDT deposits and 19 million USDT debt. So on Euler today, the difference between those two positions is basically a 40 million swing. On the one hand, 20 million USDC, and the other hand, 20 million USDT. So the big 40 million swing there, and that's that 1 million initial liquidity essentially provides the same virtual liquidity as a 40 million pool. Now, what happens once I've got the debt position, after Rebecca swap, I've now got this debt that I have to repay somehow. I could either pay it back myself, but what's cool about EulerSwap is that the EulerSwap curve incentivizes other swappers to come in now and swap back the other way. And when they swap back the other way, they're essentially going to repay some of my Tether debt, and they're going to withdraw some of my USDC collateral. And so hopefully you can see that by repaying debt and withdrawing collateral, or adding collateral and taking out more debt, you can actually provide just-in-time liquidity to service much bigger swaps than the initial liquidity you provided. And so what Yasu saw on Twitter the other day was that we provided $250,000 worth of initial liquidity, but our account was magically able to facilitate a swap of $1.6 million. So someone swapped 1.6 million on a much smaller pool, which is kind of remarkable and a very exciting feature of Euler. And then, I saw is the limit 50x? Well, the limit's set by the loan to value parameter. So if the loan to value was higher, then you could do much bigger. So if you had a loan to value of 0.99, you could actually do 100x leverage trades, and you could do 200 times the liquidity or whatever. If you have a smaller loan to value, then you can borrow much less, and so the amount of just-in-time liquidity you can offer is much smaller.
Thank you. And I guess that's why the slogan for the builder competition is JIT happens, just in time happens.
Yeah. Exactly.
Which confused me at first, but that makes sense now to me.
Yeah.
So both Juan and XYK or Zeke maybe are kind of talking now, leaning more into the builder competition and talking about some ideas that they might be able to build out. So Juan has asked, can you think of any integrations with Uniswap v4 hooks on like a high level? Can you think of any?
Good question. So yeah, there's the EulerSwap code base integrates with Uniswap v4 and its hook system, which is really cool. Right now, I'd say it's a fairly simple integration. Essentially, that just allows people to route trades through Uniswap into Euler, and vice versa. Can I think of an extra Uniswap integration? I can tell you about lots of things that I think would be cool, like modifications and extensions of EulerSwap, which you could perhaps integrate through a hook. I didn't design this part of the code, so I don't know how easy this would be, but I think other people on Uniswap have been looking at some other cool hook designs, I think, that could also kind of complement EulerSwap. One being a dynamic fee, so a fee that essentially is scaled to help reduce impermanent loss, or a fee that is scaled relative to volatility or other conditions. I think that could be interesting. I think asymmetric fees, so like you trade, it's free to swap one way, but it costs you more to swap the other way. That actually makes a lot of sense, and it's something we've observed fairly early on with stablecoins talking to us. They often have like an instant redemption facility. Well, they have a way to essentially mint an asset for free, and so that's kind of like a free swap. But then to withdraw it takes time. It might take 7 days or something. So therefore, you need to swap back. People want to exit the situation. They're prepared to pay a fee to be able to do it instantly rather than wait the 7 days. And so sometimes it makes sense to have asymmetric fees. I would also say that there's like a growing trend towards institutionalization of DeFi. And with that comes requirements for limiting who can swap or when they can swap. And so adding, if you want to do a Solidity-based code competition, you could contribute something around compliance. So yeah, thinking about who can swap in the pools and adding checks there. Euler vaults themselves, the underlying place where the assets live in EulerSwap themselves, have their own hooks. So you could also think about ways to tie in Uniswap hooks and Euler hooks and make them interact with one another, perhaps yeah, that we're getting into the more advanced realms of things here. But I think there's definitely a really big design space there for the future.
And also, of course, on Thursday, we have another workshop with Doug, which is going to be more about integration ideas. So those of you who have questions about that on a high level or want to go slightly more into the weeds, Thursday is definitely the time and place for us to do that, because we don't have too long now. But Michael has asked, what chains and test nets do you plan on deploying the EulerSwap contracts on during the competition?
Yeah, good question. So we are presently in live with something called a Cantina Capture the Flag competition. So we deployed Euler smart contracts last week on mainnet, and then we deposited $500,000 into those contracts and invited hackers to come and take the money if they could. So, if anyone's got a couple of, you've got 2 days left to try and take the money. If you fancy having a go, we'd appreciate it, helping to secure Euler. But yeah, that's where the contracts are deployed right now. So if you're literally getting started today, that's the only place you can find them, is those 2 test accounts on the Cantina competition. I think once that's closed, which I believe is later on Wednesday night, or maybe even early on Thursday, once that's closed, we'll be reviewing, seeing if anything was reported during the competition. To my knowledge, nothing's been reported so far. So that all being well, I think we expect to deploy new versions of the contracts. We'll probably be focusing immediately on mainnet and on Unichain. Obviously, we've been working closely with the EulerSwap Foundation, the EulerSwap team, with the collaboration on the hook side of things. So yeah, certainly those 2 places, and then we'll be rolling out additional chains soon after, I expect, depending on demand. We've got deployments of Euler on a whole load of other chains as well, including Avalanche and Sonic and Bearer Chain and Bob as well. And I'm probably forgetting some, but we're on about 8 or 9 chains. So yeah, we can go wherever people want. One thing I would say is we tend not to do test nets. And the reason why we don't do that is because for a lending protocol, where you have lots of third-party dependencies like oracles, and the need for in our case, like other external dexes to facilitate swaps and so on, you end up, when you deploy to a testnet, you end up having to kind of mock all those third-party dependencies up. And so weirdly, it becomes harder to deploy a lending protocol to a testnet, more costly than it is on a production environment. And so if people want to do tests and run things, I would encourage people to check out maybe Unichain as a starting point, which will probably be a much lower cost environment to do test swaps on, or interact with the systems on an L2 rather than mainnet.
And where would be the best place for people to get up-to-date information about like what change you're deploying? So obviously on Wednesday it might change, like the addresses. Where's the best place for people to check? Is it Discord, Docs?
I would say follow along on Twitter is where we'll probably announce where new chains have gone, new chain deployments have happened. Just feel free to drop in Discord and ask us, are you there yet? When? If not, when? The answer will probably be quite soon. So yeah, feel free to come in and ask in Discord if you're uncertain about anything. We can happily provide information. The actual deployments themselves will also be recorded all on our GitHub. So you'll be able to see, once we've deployed somewhere, there'll be like a list of addresses where you can find and go and interact with them. And then, slowly but surely, we'll be bringing along online more features on the website and other places as well. So we'll communicate that via Discord and Twitter.
Very nice. So I see we've got quite a lot of stuff that's just come in. Sky, your questions about ideas and kind of getting some feedback on your ideas, if you could put those in Discord instead, just because we don't have time to dive deep into all of them now, and make sure you do it during this session so you can copy and paste across instead of having to rewrite it all. Same for you, XYK or Zeke, I can't think how else to pronounce that, for your question about control theory ideas. But we do have 2 questions here about the capture the flag competition. So one of them is, if you were competing in the capture the flag competition, where would you prioritize looking? Which is an interesting question.
How would I hack EulerSwap? Good question. What would I do? I would probably look for. Yeah, I mean, all AMMs they follow a kind of what's called an invariant, right? Like you don't want liquidity to be taken out of the system by swaps more than the curve allows, basically. So if you imagine like an AMM curve, you always want to be either on the curve or above the curve. If you're in one of those places, swaps are only ever going to add more liquidity than the curve allows. If you ever go below the curve, something bad's broken. I'd say something bad's happened. And even if you go below the curve by like 1 way, that can be catastrophic. I think it was friends of ours at Kyber were, impacted by a really awful exploit where the guy found like a rounding error of 1 way. But that 1 way allowed them to then like loop up and, amplify the exposure. So yeah. The curve is kind of king in an AMM, and if you can go below, if you can do some kind of weird swap and go below the curve, then you can probably do something bad to the system. So that's where I would probably immediately start with things like that.
A nice hint for how people might go about hacking Euler, but I hope that they're unsuccessful, truly. So we are actually running out of time now. I saw one more question about the capture the flag competition, or actually it was about in Discord, you said that after the capture the flag, there'll be the main factories installed, and Lumo is asking what those are referring to. Yeah,
so when we did the capture the flag competition, so every Euler instance is there's like a factory that helps deploy the instances of EulerSwap, so for each account and so on. And then they track the addresses and they help all the integrators figure out which assets are in which addresses and so on. So they help keep like things tidy. So the factories are crucial for just keeping track of which pools are like which potential swaps are available on EulerSwap. And for the capture the flag competition, we deployed 2 instances, and they were mainly for testing purposes. After the competition, we're going to deploy like the full production factories, and so they will become clear on the GitHub. The only thing that we've modified after the competition is there was a recommendation to just slightly modify one of the events to make it that's with the logs from the contracts to make it easier for people to interact with Euler and integrate with the to create dashboards and things. So we fixed that, and then we're going to be redeploying. So that's what I meant by that. There'll be new factories deployed that will be then the official production EulerSwap factories, which you guys can build on.
Okay, cool. So we are officially out of time. So hopefully everyone's questions, aside from the ideation stuff, that we'll talk a bit more about the integration ideas stuff on Thursday with Doug. Hopefully everything has been answered. So thank you so much, Michael, for coming in and talking a bit about your journey and introducing us to EulerSwap. I hope everyone is super excited to get started. I've put the links back up again on screen now to join the Euler Discord and the Encode Discord. Make sure you do that during this session so that you have the right places to go in between workshops to ask questions. Massive thank you again, everyone, for being able to join us today. I'm really excited to see so many of you wanting to get started and asking so many questions. It's amazing to see. Michael, do you have any last words of wisdom, any last advice for our builders before they go off and start building?
No, have fun and like pop into Discord. We and do ask questions, because we're then we can brainstorm, and we'll provide docs and information, other ideas there. So if you are sort of at this point just thinking, I don't know what just happened, I've got no idea, come in and talk to us. We'll hopefully make it clearer there, and we can sort of go from any level, like all the way we can deal with smart contract, really advanced stuff, or really just start from scratch and be like, okay, you want to just try and do something more UI focused or more graphic based, then that'd be awesome too. So we welcome all sorts of different types of projects, but just come and chat to us. It's the best thing to do, because we're still not entirely sure ourselves, you know, what all the awesome ideas that you guys might come up with. Since announcing it, we've had a wide range of feedback come in, and you probably got really nice ideas that we haven't even thought of yet as well.
Okay, great to hear. So thank you very much, everyone. I will see you all very soon, hopefully in Discord, but otherwise on Thursday. I hope you have a great rest of your week. If you have any questions in the meantime, please shoot me a message or put something in Discord. And yeah, we'll see you all very soon. Thank you, Michael, for coming in again.
Thank you, Rebecca. Cheers.
Bye, everyone.